Have you noticed that your Clack WS1 Air over Media Iron and Sulphur filter has stopped removing the iron and stopped removing the sulfur from your water? What gives? All of a sudden, those iron stains are back, that sulfur smell is back, and they're worse than ever before. Does that mean the system is toast? Does that mean you have to get rid of it? Or can it be rebuilt? Can it be cleaned up? Can it be repaired? Absolutely. You can do all of those things, and I'll show you how to troubleshoot and do the full rebuild step by step, starting right now. Hi, I'm Gary the Water Guy, and I simplify water filtration to help you conquer crappy water for your family. Now, whether you're watching this live or the replay, welcome. This video is specifically made for the do-it-yourself homeowner or the plumber that's looking to learn more about how to rebuild their air over media iron and sulfur filter. Now, whether you've got a FOB, FOC, FOK, or even an FON, the procedure is exactly the same, and you'll find that rebuilding is a fraction of the cost of replacing it with a new system. Also, I definitely suggest you watch this live stream right to the end, because during the live stream, I'll have all kinds of troubleshooting tips and tricks, and I'll be sharing them with you. And at the end, I'll have a featured section just about how you can extend the life and even how you can improve your air over media iron and sulfur filter. Now, whether you're watching this live or the replay, whether you're watching this live and participating with me, I definitely encourage, now whether you're watching this live or are watching the replay, welcome. I really love you participating with these live streams with me. Of course, the advantage of watching it live is that you can participate with your questions and comments, and I'll answer them live for you right here, right now on YouTube. The replay's got a ton of information, and it's going to be a great resource for you to come back in the future and to check out something. Hey, what did Gary say about that? Or what was about that? And that kind of thing. And you can refer back to it at any time that you want. I've got links in the description down below. You'll often see me pointing that way, and to a bunch of videos that go into more depth in some of the different areas that I'll be talking about, and definitely check those out. So I encourage you to get your questions ready, and when you have your questions ready, I'll flash them on the screen for you. This is one that I got ready for earlier, but please put those on. And again, if I definitely encourage you, if whether this is your first time or whether you've been here a number of other times for my live streams, please tell us where you're from and where you're watching this from, and everybody seems to get a real kick out of that. So I did a, where is this thing? Picture here. So earlier on, I posted on my community tab some information, trying to get information to see what you'd be interested in during this live stream. And so this is these are some of the questions I asked to see where the interest was. And you can see the troubleshooting was really scored 47% out of everyone. We had 19 votes on this. So that was number one. And when to replace instead of rebuild was 26%. And then we went down to upgrading opportunities in conjunction with the rebuild, and specialized tools, and when to partially or fully rebuild. So so that is all right. So so we're obviously going to be starting off with what areas were the areas of concern. And again, I really encourage you to add your questions and comments. I'll see if we've got any yet here. And we'll answer those as we go along. Nothing yet. So please add your questions and comments. So we're going to talk about troubleshooting before rebuild, and so that you can determine whether or not you really need to rebuild it or not. And let's see. Oh, and this is what I was talking about earlier, just so you know. At the right-hand side of your screen, I also have another poll going during this live stream, and I'll be looking, checking back to it off and on throughout the live stream, just to kind of see what you're interested in getting more information about today. All right. So, and these are the questions I asked. Can I really rebuild this myself? How do I know when to rebuild? Should I just replace it? And where can I find the tools needed? Whoops. And all right. And So when these air over media iron and sulfur filters came about, I don't know, about 8 or 10 years ago, they were a real game changer. And because before that, we used chemicals like chlorine to oxidize the iron and the sulfur out of the water. But of course, that chlorine went into the water. You didn't want it in your house, so we had to pull it back out. What are you going to do with that chlorine? Well, you backwash it to the septic system. What's the worst thing you can put in your septic system? Is chlorine. So those systems, these really phased those out. And then we also had those air berm systems, the 2-tank systems, where we had a Mazzy that sucked in the air and restricted the water flow coming from your well, and it sucked in the air, and they did a pretty good job, but the only problem was they required a lot of maintenance, and the maintenance was difficult to do because you had to actually disassemble that Mazzy before you did the maintenance, and so that was always a pain. And like I say, they restricted the flow of coming water, and often rural properties or cottages, there isn't a whole lot of flow from the well to begin with. So to restrict it, to be able to suck air in to oxidize out that iron and sulfur, that wasn't the greatest thing either. So then when these systems came out, it was a big, big deal, because not only are they totally chemical free, but they're also super easy to service. And I'll talk about the most common service points as I'm going along, because that would be part of the rebuild process, right? And that's what we're talking about here today. Now, eventually, like everything else, over the 8 or 10 years or so, we've learned a lot about what kind of service they need, how often they need service, and under what circumstances. So again, I'll be talking about that as we go along. And if you're wondering why I keep looking down, that's because my notes are here. Believe me, I've got so much information that I need to share with you today. I don't want to take a chance on just winging it and missing out some of the stuff. So one of the great things about the Clack WS1 valve, it's a commercial grade valve. It was made to be rebuilt. It was made to last a long time and under difficult situations like removing iron from your water. So it's a very, very robust system. So rebuilding it, repairing it, and moving on is definitely what it's built for. So if you have some difficulties with them, you don't need to just turf it out and get a new one. You can easily fix it up and or rebuild. And so one of the things I always encourage is if you know how something works, before you start to attempt to work on it, etc. I've got a great YouTube video, and again, I got a link in the description down below. I definitely encourage you to check that out. And you can learn all about how these systems work. Basically what they do, they suck in air through the top here. It creates a big air bubble within the tank. As you run your water sprayed through that air bubble. It oxidizes or brings out the iron and the sulfur out of the water, and then the media inside the tank traps that oxidized iron and sulfur, and then it backwashes it out every 3 days. When it backwashes it out, it pushes out that air bubble to the drain line, and then it rebuilds the air bubble with fresh air, and then it goes on from there. That's the short version. But like I say, if you're looking for more details, I definitely encourage you to check out that video. Okay, and I guess the next point that you need to consider is does yours have a Clack valve? So it won't say the words Clack on it, okay? And because ours are sold under the Hume water filtration brand, that's our own brand, but they can be sold under a whole bunch of different brands. Nelson sells them, Viqua sells them, Water Depot has them, Excalibur, they're all Clack valves. And how do you identify a Clack valve? Well, it's pretty straightforward. Let me just grab... So there's a couple of telltale signs that you can see with the Clack valve, and a number of them is the valve body, how the valve body is shaped, but I think the most obvious thing is the bypass. So if I turn this guy around here, you can see this is the bypass here, and you can see that it has two red handles on it to open and close the bypass. But one thing that's very unique about the Clack system is that they're pointy on one end and they're open on the other end like an arrow. And that's the only ones that I've ever seen that are shaped like that. So you know that if yours has those the bypass handles shaped like that, it's definitely a Clack valve. And so I'm still looking for some questions. Come on, you guys, looking for some questions about these whole systems. I'd really love to answer yours. If not, even just say hello. All right, great. So the same parts and procedures apply to any Clack valve. What's inside is different. Now the faceplate might be a little bit different, might be different shape, might be wider, buttons in a different in a different arrangement, but believe me, inside they're all exactly the same. All right. So if yours isn't a Clack valve, does that mean that what I'm going to be talking about here today doesn't apply? No, absolutely not. A lot of the troubleshooting and a lot of the procedures, repair procedures, and that will be the same. It's just the parts will be totally different, of course. So I still encourage you to watch. Okay, so when we talk about FOB, FOC, FOK, FON, what's all that mean? Well, the last letter talks about what media is inside the tank. So different medias work different ways. So for example, if you've got high sulfur and you've got high iron, an FOK is the way to go. Okay, and that means that the K stands for K-Lox. That's the media inside the tank. Now there's some other restrictions about that, flow rate and a few other things, so you can't just automatically say, hey, I'll get an FOK. It depends on a number of factors. Now, if you're not sure on which one would be the best for you, then you can always contact us at our email, info@watereastore.com, and that's our email address. So you can always send us an email, and we can check that out for you. Okay, so... but like I say, there's certain circumstances. Your pH is a factor. There's a number of factors. So we get emails here all the time saying, hey, I've got 2 parts per million of iron or something like that. What's the best system for me? So we have to ask you a few more questions about how much water you use, how many people in your household, what's your pH, what's the flow rate from your well pump, and those are common questions. So like I say, there's certain circumstances, whichever one works the best. Now, in terms of the valve and that, they're all exactly the same. So, and again, I've got a great YouTube video that explains the difference between each of those products, and I encourage you to check those out if you're interested. All right, and great. So why would they need to be rebuilt in the first place? Well, what happens is when you're removing iron from water, the iron sticks to things, and it's iron, so it's a mineral. So what happens is a piston inside that moves back and forth within a seal pack, and what happens, that iron creates grit inside there, and it wears out the seals as it moves back. Also, the iron leaves deposits. So those deposits tend to form in the nooks and crannies, and they build up, and then all of a sudden, it's causing you grief. The valve isn't doing what it's supposed to be doing, and then it's a problem. What does that iron look like? If you think of a popsicle, a fudgesicle popsicle, when it starts to melt, that's what those iron deposits look like inside here. And it's I can assure you, it's a real mess. And that's what causes that. So, all right. So we got somebody with a question. That's great. Thank you for that. And send. And this is from Adventure Kevin. Love your channel. I have flaky, crusty residue that appears on the exterior of all my brass valves throughout my house. I'm on rural water. I have an iron sulfur remover. Oops. And water softener, I assume that's going to. And so if it's appearing on the exterior of your fixtures, then it's probably a problem either with high sodium in your water or low pH. The water's acidic, that kind of thing. It's a little bit more than just your iron and your hardness. So I would definitely have your water tested and see what's happening with that. But thanks very much for your question. I appreciate it, Kevin. So fortunately, you've invested in an iron sulfur filter with this Clack WS1 valve. So it's easy to disassemble. It's easy to rebuild. But I'm going to tell you right away, it's going to be messy. So make sure you plan for it. Make sure you put down some towels because there'll be some water being spilled. And also, I'm going to be talking about replacing the media. So, but you only replace the media as a last resort. So so don't remove the valve unless you're 100% sure you're going to be replacing the media. Because the problem is, when you unscrew the valve, there's a riser tube inside. So there's a cone at the bottom of the valve that looks like this. And then there's a riser tube inside that fits inside that cone. So when you unscrew that valve and you lift it up, this cone is going to grab onto that riser tube and it's going to try to pull it out. And what that means is the riser tube comes up, and as soon as it comes up, it's cone-shaped at the bottom. So what happens is the media packs in underneath there, and now you can't get it back down inside there. So don't remove the valve unless you're 100% sure you're going to be replacing that media. Keep that in mind. But like I say, we'll be talking a little bit more about media replacement a little bit later. Okay, so let's first do a bunch of general checks on the system. So first of all, is it showing the time? Is it lit up here? Okay, that's the first thing to check. If it's not lit up, then there's either a problem with the circuit board or the power going to the circuit board, and you can check that out with, on the end here it has these. Will that focus on that? I think I have to cover my face. Anyway, oh, there it is right there. So on the end here, you can check the electrical connections when you plug this in and see if that has power. And if it has power, then that tells you need a new circuit board. If it doesn't have power, then you just need a new one of these, which, as you probably guessed, it is a lot less costly than a whole new circuit board. And okay, so the next thing you would do is start a regeneration cycle. And you do that by pressing the regen button and holding it down. So remember, at this stage, we're just going through the troubleshooting to make sure to find out what's wrong with your system, if anything, to find out A, if it's worthwhile rebuilding, or B, maybe it's something much more minor that you don't actually need a full rebuild. Okay, so once you've heard it go through the cycle, so this one isn't hooked up to water, but if yours was hooked up to water, which of course it should be, at this point you should hear water gushing to the drain. Now if you don't hear water gushing to the drain, that tells you that either your drain line's clogged, or it tells you that the connecting rod has come loose from the piston. What am I talking about there? Here. So inside here, this part at the end here is called the drive end cap. And if we pull that out, okay, so the whole thing's come out here, but anyway, that shows you here. So here you can see that this is the spacer stack and the piston is inside here. But if I put my hand behind here, no, you can't see it that way. If I put it in front of my face, yeah. You see this little wee rod in between? That's the connecting rod. And I've seen it happen that connecting rod actually breaks. Now, it usually breaks because the sand has gotten inside the valve and has restricted the movement of the piston, and because of that, it's broken. But if the valve goes through like I say, to a cycle, and you don't hear anything happening, no water running, check that first, because that's probably broken. Go into brine cycle. Yeah, so then the next cycle, you push the regen button again. So now it's going to go into the brine or air draw cycle. Okay, so this is where it sucks in air through here. Okay, and when it goes through that cycle, now the flow should be very slow. So that's the first thing you should be checking, just to make sure that the flow has slowed down. If it hasn't, that's another great signal that inside the piston and the seal pack need to be replaced. So the next thing you need to do during this cycle is you go over here and listen here. Okay, this is the air inlet. So during the brine or air draw cycle, you should hear like a gurgling sound, a sucking sound. And if you cover this up and let go, then that sound should be gone, and then you should hear it again. You should almost hear like a popping sound. And if that isn't happening, that tells you that it's not drawing air, and it could be a number of different things, which we're going to be going over in just 1 second here. The next thing that I kind of skipped over, but it's the other, is if you press the regen button and you don't hear anything, that tells you that the motor isn't working. To replace the motor is super simple. So first of all, let's talk about removing the faceplate. So on either side, there's 2 tabs. Actually, I can probably zoom in a little bit here. Oh, that's a little better, isn't it? So on either side of the valve, there's 2 tabs on the side here. See these tabs? So all you do is you just grab those tabs. Let me position this a little bit better so you can see it better, and pull those off. All right. So here's the motor here. Replacing the motor is probably the easiest thing I've ever seen done in any kind of water filtration equipment. So let me first shut off the power. So you just do that by pulling this down. And by the way, if you're wondering what's on my thumb, that's potassium permanganate. I did a service call yesterday for a customer that had a green sand iron filter. And although I was wearing rubber gloves, I still got potassium permanganate on my finger. I didn't have any hydrogen peroxide or vinegar to mix together to clean that off. So I apologize, it looks a little pretty slovenly. Anyway, so when it comes to replacing the motor, super simple. All you do is just unplug it, move the retaining clip, wiggle a little bit, and slide it out. I mean, that's the easiest thing ever. Now, having said all that, how many motors have I replaced? Not very many, I'll tell you that right now. Clack has a super reliable motor. All right, so let's have a look here. Okay, great. So let's carry on. And so we talked about the air draw. Okay. So another thing you need to think about, and is a huge indicator that the unit may need to be rebuilt, especially the media needs to be replaced, and that is, does the water flow slow down? In other words, in your house, have you noticed the water has gotten slower and slower over the last few weeks and that kind of thing? And that could mean that the media is clogged inside here. How do you test that? Again, super easy. All you need to do, run some water somewhere in the house. Usually a bathroom I find is best. Flush the toilet and see how much the water flow slows down while the tank is refilling, and then it speeds up a little bit more. So do that once, and then come over here, and you see the bypass valves? So bypass the unit by pointing the two arrows with the ends pointing toward each other, and go back to the same bathroom, run the faucet, and again flush the toilet. If you notice that the water slows down a whole lot less now, then that means that the media or something's clogging the media inside the tank, and that media needs to be replaced. So that's one thing. So another thing to check out is when the system is in service, do you hear water trickling to the drain? It's usually just like a really minor little trickle, and again, you can only do it when the unit is in service. Actually, why don't I put this back in service so you can see what I'm talking about? Okay, so it's just going back into its home position right now. That's why you hear that motor running. All right, you can see it coming out here, and see that? All right, great. Okay, so another test that you can do, let me get back to the main camera again. Yeah, so another test that you can do is if you're not sure water's running to the drain or not, what you can do is just put the unit into bypass, again, by turning it in bypass, and then you can remove the drain line connector here. So you see there's an E-clip here. Just pull that out. That's what the E-clip looks like. By the way, that's shaped like an E. And then you just pull that out. And then what you can do is slowly put it back into service by opening up the inlet valve. Now, if you see water very slow, now again, this has got to be in service. It can't be in backwash or anything like that. But if you see water very slowly keep coming and keep coming and keep coming, that tells you that definitely you need to replace the seal pack and the pistons. Water is leaking past them, and you've slowly got water running to the drain 24/7 all the time, and you'd be amazed at how much water you're going to waste. All right. So let's get back to talking about, put this back into service. So let's get back to talking about if you're not hearing air being sucked in. So what that means is either there's a problem with the air draw system up here, or it's a problem with the injector. So what am I talking about with the injector? Well, the injector lives on top of the valve right here. If I hold up the valve body, it sits inside here. That's where the injector sits. I'll give it a little bit more light in here. And where it says down, that's where the injector would sit inside there. What's the injector look like? It looks like this. This is what the injector looks like. Can you see me? I'll give it a little bit more light. That's what the injector looks like. Now, if that's clogged, and if it hasn't been cleaned for a number of years or replaced, it probably is clogged with iron. And so that's one of the first maintenance type things that you should do. So how do you do that? Super simple. All you do is bypass the unit, click the regen button, hold it down for 5 seconds so it starts a cycle. And what that's going to do is going to release all the pressure inside the unit, and then you can get started. Okay, once you've done that, then all you do is you just remove the cap here. Now, normally they're not hand tight like this one is. But this is Frankenstein. This is the guy that I use for all my demos. And so then using the edge here, actually let me zoom in a little bit more. Yeah, you can see a little bit better there, right? So using the edge here, the rim, is that you can use that to pry out the old injector. And here it comes. Now, the color is significant. Now, this one here, I'll hold it up here so you can see it a little bit better. This one here is a used one. In fact, I just replaced this one the other day for a customer. So you can't see through it because it's totally clogged, and you can see it's totally covered with iron, because new, these things are totally one color, blue. And that's another thing you need to be careful of. You need to make sure you replace it with the same color one as you have. So all you need to do is clean up the inside of this cap and this little cone filter here. Just clean that up with a toothbrush. That seems to work. Oh, this little cone filter here, sorry. And that works really well. And then all you need to do is put the new injector back in the same spot. Push it all the way down. And then I usually put some clear silicone, plumber silicone grease around the O-ring. And then we'll just tighten that up. And it should be a little bit more than hand tight. Just do it hand tight and then just use some pliers to tighten it up a little bit more. All right, let's get back to the main camera here. All right, great. So so you need to replace that. Now, then you again put it into put it back into service. Put it back into service by getting back to the home position. Now this one isn't programmed as an iron and sulfur filter right now, just so you know, if you're wondering what these numbers mean. I've got a great video on programming, and again, I got a link in the description down below, so you can definitely check that out. But I'm taking it back to its home position. Almost there. I can't fast forward this any faster. All right, so when you get back into your home position, then what you can do is try it again. So put it into a regen cycle by holding down the button, holding it down for 5 seconds. It goes into the backwash. Then once it starts counting down, press the regen button again, and then it goes into the brine draw. Now listen over here and see if you've hear that gurgling sound and if you hear air being sucked in. If you don't, okay, that may very well mean that you've got a problem with the air draw assembly. This right here. And if you have this kind here, the ones that look like this with the screen on it, I found them very problematic. And we've replaced a lot of them. And I definitely suggest you replace yours. And the new ones, well, let me show you here. Let me take out this one. And I found that I've done a lot of things and I can't get the unit to draw air. And then when I replace this, ta-da, it draws air. So these are the new ones here. If you look at them both side by side, here I think you can see them like that, right? See them both side by side. So the big difference is this is the check valve. This is the what lets air in but doesn't let water out. And if you look at the bottom, this one has the check valve built in here. This one does not. And I just found that this section here that actually draws the air is a lot less restrictive than this one. So I definitely encourage you to replace yours with this. And again, I've got a link to this in the description down below to do that. So as part of, sorry, as part of this rebuild, we're going to be replacing this because it's an improvement. So something else that's an improvement is the drain elbow and the drain connector itself. So again, these are the ones that traditionally have been installed on the units. And to be honest, they still come with this connector on it. So this is a compression fitting. And you run the pipe inside here, so you can run 1/2-inch PEX. We typically use that for drain line, and you can run it in there. And then when you tighten this up, like I say, it's let me zoom in a little bit for you. When you tighten this up, this is a compression fitting, so it compresses and it holds the tubing in there. I don't like this. We've had one or two that's actually popped out. And so for obvious reasons, that's why I don't like it. So what we traditionally do here when we do an installation, and I'm encouraging you to also, is remove this fitting and toss it out, and then replace it with one of these. So this is, you can see it here. Replace it with one of these, because this is just, you can just buy this at Home Depot or any home hardware store. It's 3/4 inch female, threaded, to a 1/2-inch PEX. And the beauty of this is you can thread it right on the fitting. Now the other thing we found with these fittings over the years is they tend to leak from here, from this port here. And so why is this port there in the first place? It was supposed to be a silencer. It was supposed to make, during backwash, it was supposed to keep the noise down. But unfortunately, we found that over the years, it'll start to leak from here. So again, we've got new drain elbows that are available without that. Okay, so I definitely encourage you, if you're doing a rebuild, to change yours over this way. You can still use the same drain line flow control you had on the old one, and switch this over. So now we've changed the air inlet, and we've also changed the drain connector. Let me put this back together here. All right, great. Let's go back to the main camera again. Okay, so those are two very important changes. All right, so if the water continuously flows to the drain, that tells you that the pistons and the seal pack has been compromised, and that's a fairly common concern with these. That does happen fairly often, and I'm almost willing to bet that depending on your iron content, that's probably going to happen to yours at some point. Okay, the next thing is, do you have media going to the drain? If yours has a clear drain line and you've noticed sort of specks going through there, or if yours drains into like a laundry sink or something like that, or if at the kitchen faucet you run some water, you notice these black specks coming through, that tells you that something's compromised inside the tank. That means either this cone at the top has let go and is allowing media through, or that tells you the riser tube has been compromised at the bottom and media is getting through. And then for that, you'd have to rebuild the replace the media, replace the riser tube, replace the cone and the gravel inside the tank. All right, so moving right along here. Okay, so to rebuild the inside of the valve is actually pretty straightforward. Actually, before we do that, I'm just going to show you something here. And let me zoom in again, and I'll turn this way. I don't know if you can see this, but right up here, there's a small disc. And if you pull that out, actually, let me shut off the power first. But if we pull that disc out, you'll see something that you've probably seen before, but not in this context. So this is a CR2032 battery, like the kind that you see in key fobs, etc. And that's the power backup for these systems. So as you may or may not know, if your power is off for more than an hour, off for an hour and a half or so or less, you don't have to reset the time. You don't have to do anything. If your power is off for more than that, all you have to do is reset the time. But that's what it retains at. So again, if this system is more than 5 years old, I would definitely replace that battery. All right, we're going in. So across the top here, you can see that there's two tabs across the top here. Oh, I'm falling off my box here. There's two tabs across the top here. So what you do is pull up on those tabs, and then pull the whole carriage forward, and then you just pull this cable out and put that aside. All right, so now we need to get into here. So I find the valve disassembly tool is definitely the best way to go with one of these. And so you just lock it in there. Now yours will be full of water, so it won't be so tippy. And then you just unscrew this, as my wife says, lefty-loosey, righty-tighty. And, all right, let's go back to full screen. Great, so then now all you do is just unscrew this. And once it's loose, you just pull it out like that. All right, and just like this, you'll see what comes out is two pistons. So this is the main piston. This is the main piston, the yellow one, and this is the brine piston. So whether it's a water softener or an air over media iron and sulfur filter like this one here, you have both of those pistons. So make sure. So if you pull yours out and yours doesn't have both of those pistons, either one's broken off, or someone else worked on it in the past and for some reason didn't put it in, and that may explain why your system isn't working. So we take those and set those aside. And then inside here you'll see the seal pack. So sometimes these slip out as easily as this one is right now. Sometimes they don't. And if they don't come out very easily, you can use a screwdriver or something like that to pry it out like this. Let me zoom in a little bit so you can see a little bit better. See, you can pry it out with a screwdriver like this. Or there's a special tool that you can use In really severe cases, you can use this tool here. Let me get out to the main camera again. Here. So there's a tool like this that you can use. So what happens is you just put that inside. And I haven't used this one very often, to be perfectly honest with you. And then you can lever it out like this. Oh, you can't see because of the light. I'm blocking the light. Sorry. You just slip it inside. Let me just push it back in again. Oh, it's fouled on one of the seals. So this is a used one, as you can probably tell. There. So you can see this is a used one. You can see how red it is in the middle from iron. Now I've seen these totally caked, and like I say, it looks like melted fudgesicle, and it's a real mess. And if you can look inside there, you can probably see there's some iron residue inside there. Anyway, let me show you again how this tool works. Yeah, so again, you just slip that inside, and then it expands a little bit, and then you just push it out, and that pries it out, and then you can pull it out. Like I say, most of the time they're not too bad to get out, but sometimes they are brutal. So if you're looking how to get this tool, like I say, you can get it on our website. And Gary, where's our website? Here. Yep, there it is. Sorry, that's our email, info@watereStore.com. You can send us an email there and contact us with any information you're looking for in that kind of thing. And something I didn't mention earlier, but it's worth mentioning right now. Do you see here? Do you see that there on the inside here, there's a QR code inside here? See if I can zoom in on that. Yep, see there's a QR code in there. So you can scan that with your smartphone, and you can actually see a manual. Now, it's a very basic manual. If you're looking for a more in-depth manual, we have them on our we have them available, and we can always email it to you. Okay, so you've cleaned all that stuff out, and so now to rebuild, you just reverse the steps. So again, it's exactly the same. So you grab the two pistons. Now, one of the neat things that Clack's done is that you can't assemble these incorrectly. So the brine piston will only fit on one end of the other piston. So that's pretty straightforward. So you can put those two together. Just set that there for a moment. And then you grab the new seal pack right here. So I would clean this out with a rag and clean that up a little bit and slide that back in. Now I always recommend that you replace, when you're replacing the seal pack, also put in new pistons. Some people say, oh, there's nothing wrong with the pistons, I can reuse them. If you want to do that, you can. Just be careful. If you have any iron buildup on here, just use some very fine sandpaper and just lightly sand the outside of this piston. I've heard people say to me, no, you shouldn't do that. Well, believe me, I went to Clack training school, and they were very specific about that. If you've got iron in your water, or it's used for an FOB, FOC, or FOK, you should definitely do that. All right. So we can attach that here. So, oh, I grabbed the wrong one. All right. So here's the old one. So what you can do is you can just disconnect this. It's a little bit easier if you extend this out, and you can just turn the this here to extend it back out. Okay, and we'll pull that off. Put the new one on. And again, we can just feed that in and tighten it up. So you don't want to over tighten this. Hand tight and then just a little bit more. That's all you want to do, just so it doesn't leak. And again, you can use the disassembly tool. Tighten that up. And like I say, when you feel some significant resistance, then it's time to stop. All right, great. Now, just be careful of the power wire that's here. You need to thread it up in the top right corner here. top right corner here. Let me zoom in. You can see a little bit better. Top right corner here. You need to thread that in and make sure it's pushed all the way in, because if it's not pushed all the way in, you're going to have trouble latching the valve back into place. All right, or the main carriage, I should say, back into place. So then we line this up with the feet on the bottom. There it is. And it should snap in on both sides. There it is. So both sides, make sure it's totally snapped in on both sides. And then you thread that cable down through and plug that in the bottom there. So it's going to go and center itself back home. And got a question here. Al, how fine a sandpaper can be used on the piston? Great question, Al. Typically, I recommend something around 400, in and around there. Like I say, you need to be a very fine sandpaper, because you just want to even it out and smooth it out. Just remove any extra material that's on there from the iron, but you don't want to put any gouges in the piston and that kind of thing. Again, if you're replacing it, I always recommend replacing the piston, both pistons and the seal pack. And by the way, I should mention to you too that we do offer a kit, a rebuild kit on our website. And so if it's something that you're looking for, I think I had a picture of it here somewhere, right here actually. Rebuild kit on our website. So if you're having any trouble finding it, just send us an email and we can send you a link to it. Now we have them with both the white injector and the blue injector, or with no injector if yours uses a different color. Make sure you check the color of injector that you have before you go ordering that, because otherwise you may end up with the wrong one. Okay, great. Okay, so one thing that we've learned over the years is that there's more to the valve than we just talked about here. And one thing is that if you notice that when the unit is in service, that you hear like a boom, 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 like a bubbling sound or that kind of thing, or if the unit is more than a few years old, or if you've got high iron in your water, there's an internal check valve inside here that can become compromised. And so we've started checking those. We didn't check those for years because we didn't think that they'd be a problem. But then we've had a few that were causing us grief. And when we opened it up, we found they were a big problem. And so this is what they look like right here. So so you can see, and again, it slides right in here, right in here. So again, the idea is that it lets water in, but it doesn't let air out. Because remember, they build a big air bubble at the top inside the valve, right? It builds a big air bubble inside here, so we don't want to lose that air bubble. So that's what that does. So what I've found is that lately, as I've been checking these things out, these things are horrific. They were totally caked with iron. They were half open. They were just a disaster. So I've been checking these a lot more. And again, we have the replacements available on our website, waterestore.ca in Canada, waterestore.com in the USA. And they're pretty simple to replace, although they don't look simple when you first see them. So they just slide in like that. But when it comes time to replace it, you just pry it out with a screwdriver. And like I say, it's a little fiddly, but it does come out every time. Sometimes the old one gets destroyed when you take it out, but it does come out. And then you'll find that the new one doesn't seat all the way in, but when you put the bypass on and you push the bypass in and engage it and then start threading it in, you will get it back on. And that will push that internal check valve inside. All right, great. So, okay, great. So we're making some good progress here. So one thing I recommend at this stage, keep the system stock. In other words, don't try making some modifications and don't try making some other changes. And that is, if you've got a blue injector, stick with the blue injector. The drain line flow control, stick with that, etc. The only changes I recommend are just, like I say, replacing the air inlet with the more modern ones because they work better, and replacing this one here. All right, great. So we've got another question here. This is from Burek. Maybe not a good place, time to ask or time, but I'm a plumber here in Delaware. Do you know of any kind of discounts? We have some of the worst iron-containing water I've experienced in all my career. Discounts. I don't know, Barak. I'm not really sure what you're asking, but you're right. This may not be the best forum, but just send me an email, info@waterestore.com. And we do have distribution in the U.S. as we do in Canada, and we can probably help you out. I know there's been some difficulties getting stock in the U.S. From your local suppliers. So we have been shipping quite a bit of stock down from Canada to a number of plumbers and even wholesalers we've been shipping stock to. So we're having a pretty good time getting equipment and getting supplies, but for some reason or not. But I appreciate the question. All right, and so let's have a look at something else. So something else, if you want to keep up with what we're doing here, is you can always check out our social media. You can follow us on Facebook or Instagram. On Facebook, we're Water eStore. And on Instagram, we're at Water Space eStore. Underscore, I guess you say Water underscore eStore. So definitely encourage you to check that out. We've got a lot of stuff going on throughout the week. And great. And also, I encourage you to subscribe to our YouTube channel. That way be notified about all the new videos as they become available. And I definitely encourage you to do that. And some great information that we offer you up here for free. Okay. All right. So we've talked about rebuilding the valve. And that's sort of the main portion of what we're doing here today. Now, what about replacing the media? So replacing the media is if you find that you've rebuilt the valve, it's drawing air, everything's working correctly from up here. And so why is it's flashing? It's because we had it unplugged. Let me just... All right. So everything is working up here. It's drawing air. Everything's working correctly, but it's still not removing the iron, and it's still not getting rid of the sulfur. Now, or it's clogged. In other words, it slowed down your water flow. You bypass it. You got good flow in service. You got terrible flow. That means you need to replace the media. So I have... So before you replace the media, by the way, there's one other thing that you can try, and how to clean your iron filter media. And again, I've got a great YouTube video that shows you how to do that. There's a link in the description down below. Basically what you do is you replace the air draw. Oh, let me get out of here for a second so you can see what I'm talking about here. Basically what you do is you replace the air draw up here. You just disconnect this and replace the tubing, and you suck in some bleach inside here, and you leave it in there for about a half an hour or so it has time to do some work, and then you backwash it out. So bleach isn't good for the media, that's for sure, but before you go to the expense of replacing the media, I definitely encourage you to do that. And again, like I say, I've got a great YouTube video that shows you exactly the process on how to do that. And again, like I say, the first step is always doing that injector, and I went over that process with you a few minutes ago. So, okay, so let's talk about media replacement. So when it comes time to replace the media, you need to make sure you got everything on hand to do the job. So you need to know what kind of media was inside your system. So you need to know, is it an FOC, an FOB, FOK? So does that use berm media? Does it use catalytic carbon media? Or does it use Catalox media? So you need to know that. You need to know how much media you need. And I think, yeah, so again, I've got a YouTube video that goes over the whole process that, based on your tank size and a few other parameters on, so you can tell how much media you need for that job. And so you need to know that. So you need the media, you need gravel for the bottom, you need a riser tube, and you need the cone at the top, these ones. Because I can assure you, when you take that out, you won't believe how dirty these things are and how difficult they are to clean. So you're much better off to replace all of those. So again, your media, your gravel, your riser tube, and the cone at the top. So then to replace the valve, you have to knock it loose. And to do that, you just smack it. I usually hold it with my knees like this, and you smack it at the back here, and then you unscrew the valve at the top. And again, the only time you ever unscrew the valve from the top is when you're going to replace the media. You pull up the valve. Once it's unscrewed, you'll notice the riser tube's going to start coming up, and then, so this is a very messy process. So then you take the whole thing outside, lay it down, shove a hose inside, flush out the old media, and believe me, it's going to be messy. So I have a great YouTube video that goes in depth through the whole thing. Now, I did this on the water softener in my house. Oh, let me just, there. So I have a great YouTube video that goes through the whole process. Now, I did it on the water softener in my house, but the process is exactly the same for an air over media iron and sulfur filter as it is for a water softener. So the steps are identical. Just keep in mind, it's going to be messy. Don't try to do it in your home or in someone else's home, even worse. Make arrangements, have someone extra there to carry it out, flush it out outside, clean it out outside. So it's not something you want to do in the dead of winter, I can assure you. And make plans for what you're going to do with that old tired media before you replace it. All right, so great. Okay, so I got another comment here, and it says, it's from M4. I have a water softener that needs a resin replacement and meter replacement. Would you be interested in this for a video opportunity? Short answer is no. And the reason is because I've already done that. And so that's what the video I just talked about. I did it on the water softener in my own house, and that video has become very, very popular. Actually, one of my most popular videos. So I definitely encourage you to check that out. It's a very straight forward process. And M4 has got another question here, and he says, can I replace an analog meter with a digital meter? Probably not, because as far as I know, Clack WS1 has never had an analog meter. They've always been digital meters, so it's tied into the digital circuit board, right? So I don't know of any way that would work. Good question here, Al. Al's asking, does the old media need to be disposed of in a specific way? It really doesn't, or at least I've never heard of it being disposed of in a specific way. We just send it off. You know, I mean, this is not a toxic product or anything like that. So we just send it off to where we send our garbage in pails with lids on it, and away it goes. So I haven't heard. If anyone else has heard of a specific way of disposing of media, please let me know. You can put it in the comments down below. I definitely encourage you to do that. And let's see. Okay, so if you decide to replace the media, like I said, make sure you flush it out really well. Make sure you know exactly how much media goes in it before you don't just fill it right up. And believe me, in an air over media system, because of that air bubble that's at the top, there's actually a lot less media goes in here than you think goes in here. And that's why the tanks are so much larger for a 1 cubic foot air over media iron and sulfur filter. Missed it. Oh yeah, you're right. I have a Fleck 5600 L bracket metered power head. I heard it's one of the worst ones. Back in the 70s, 60s, it wasn't one of the worst ones. It was pretty state of the art back then, and lots of people have worked on them. The only problem is that valve has been around forever, and the technology is so old compared to a Clack WS1. Like if you just compare your valve, the Fleck 5600, to what I did here on this Clack one during this live stream, you'll just be blown away with the difference. So like I say, the Clack is just unbelievably advanced compared to that. All right, and so next question is, You've gone through rebuilding the valve, the valve body at the top. You may or may not have had to needed to replace the media inside the tank. And by the way, how do you know when you need to replace the media? It's because it's not working anymore. It's just not removing the iron anymore. You test the water before, you test the water after. It's the same iron content. It's just the media is worn out. When does the media wear out? Well, again, it depends on how much water you use, and it depends on how much iron there is in your water. So I've seen the media last anywhere from 4 to 5 years for really high iron content to 15 years plus for very low iron content, more sulfur content. So so it just depends on that situation. So all right, so you've replaced the media, you've rebuilt the valve as we talked about here, and now you're good to go. What are some things that you can do to make sure that this thing lasts as long as possible? Well, some of the things I already talked about, and that is change the air inlet to one of these newer technology ones, change the connection for the drain line, getting away from those, where did I put that thing? Getting away from those compression fittings and go to these PEX. Oops, let me turn this so you can see a little bit better. Going to these PEX and 3/4 inch female fittings, that works a lot better. But one of the biggest things that I can really recommend to you is get a surge suppressor. You know, one of these things that you plug your TV or your computer into at home, because the circuit board it's electronic. And if you need an iron filter, that's because you likely live in the country or in a cottage or something like that, and the power is going to fluctuate. So a surge suppressor for 30 bucks or something like that is super cheap insurance. And again, because you live in the country, you've probably got more than just an iron filter, right? You've got a water softener, you've got an iron filter, you may have a tannin filter, and you've probably got a UV light. All those things use power, and each one of those has a circuit board. Circuit board on one of these is well over $200. A ballast on a Viqua UV system is well over $400. So cheap insurance, guys, for 30 bucks or something like that. Very, very cheap insurance. So I definitely encourage you to get that. And the injector. We talked earlier about the injector maintenance. I went through that with you. It's super easy to do. These injectors, I don't know, we sell them online for, I don't know, 18 bucks or something like that. Super easy to do, super easy to replace. If you find that your unit is not drawing air, as I showed you earlier in this presentation, definitely clean that area out, replace that injector. Easy job, super simple, because if it's not oxidizing the iron and the sulfur out of the water, then you're running a lot of iron through here and it's going to get trapped and you're going to have problems. Worse, you may not even be building that air bubble and then you're going to have more problems. So again, super straightforward to do. And I have a link to a video down below. Do I have a thumbnail for that? Yes, I do, right here, actually. Picture in picture, right here. All right, so I've got a great video on Clack WS1 settings. Now, I know this says water softener settings, but believe me, I go right through the whole gamut of iron and sulfur filters in addition to water softeners, tannin filters, etc. So I definitely encourage you to check that out to make sure the settings are correct in your iron and sulfur filter. It makes a huge difference. I see the settings all over the map. So check out that video, make sure yours are correct. And check that out. And any more questions? Got one comment here from Dennis. This will be the last comment in this video. Oops, sorry. There. Great video. Well, thanks, Dennis. I appreciate your comment. I appreciate everyone from watching. Oh, Al's got one more comment here. Between the development of the Clack valve and Gary the Water Guy to show us how to maintain them, we are in much better shape than when Clack valves were the best available valve. Thank you, Gary. Well, thanks, Al. I appreciate your comments, and I definitely agree with your sentimentality. Now, people say to me, why do they still sell the Clack 5600 valve? And I'll tell you the honest truth. And the honest truth is this, is that so many plumbers have used those valves over all the years. They've gotten so accustomed to troubleshooting them and working with them and cleaning the injector and that kind of thing. They honestly don't want to learn something new. And the Clack is just so easy to learn, missing out on great opportunity there. And they're also shortchanging their customers. So Anyway, I offer my Gary the Water Guy YouTube channel. We do new videos every single week. Usually I release them on a Saturday, late morning and that kind of thing. Live streams, we typically do one a month. Usually don't do them in June, July, or August, but we'll definitely be coming one up in late May. Again, I encourage you to check out the community tab on my Gary the Water Guy YouTube channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in my next video.